Hey everyone, Mr. Carlon here. This is your second video of the week where we're going to discuss active voice and passive voice. Before we begin with today's activity, I just wanted to remind you the importance of being able to use this skill. In your English classes, you might have heard of these phrases, active voice and passive voice. You also might have seen them when you were revising a document in Word. Microsoft Word usually tells you when you write in the active voice by underlining the phrase or the sentence in blue. If you ever see that and you right-click on the sentence, it tells you what the grammar mistake is, and you'll be able to, if you're able to identify it and understand what it's asking you to do, when you go to revise it, you'll know how to revise it. And that's a really important skill to have, okay? Another reason why it's really important to know the difference between active voice and passive voice is because your teachers in English are gonna ask you to write in the active voice a lot. Most English teachers in academic writing prefer you to use the active voice and to minimize your use of passive voice. So when you hear your teachers talking about that, you'll know what it means as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and start this worksheet. What I'll do is I'll kind of review the introduction for you here. Then I'll read the directions for part one. I will do part of it for you. I'll get you started. And I'll talk about these a little bit more in the middle of the lesson, the yellow sentences, or the yellow phrases that are highlighted for you. And then we'll go on to, after we identify, we will go on to revision. All right, so we'll go ahead and revise passive sentences into the active sentence, which we've already done. We did that earlier this week, so it's nothing different. This section is actually exactly the same, just with new sentences, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. What we're gonna do first is go over the introduction and then I'll read the instructions, okay? So let's begin. This reads, the voice of a verb shows whether or not the subject is performing the action. Active voice shows that the subject is performing an action. Passive voice shows that the subject is having an action performed on it. Okay, so if we look at our sentences here, the first one is active and the second one is passive. The active sentence reads, Celine planned the party. In the passive sentence, it reads, the party was planned by Celine. As you can see that both of these sentences have some of the same words. They're just written differently, okay? And the idea is there as well. But let's go ahead and identify the difference between the first and the second and explain why the first is preferred. So Celine planned the party. My subject is Celine, and it is at the beginning of the sentence and it is doing the action. That's what we want to see. In the passive sentence, the subject is not the beginning of the sentence. It's not the party. The subject is still there, but it's at the end of the sentence, okay? It's part of like this prepositional phrase that's followed, that follows this passive phrase, okay? So it's definitely more confusing. It's more difficult to write like this, but a lot of times when we try to write fancy, we end up making this mistake, and we need to know when we do how to fix it, okay? So again, subject is still there, but one is at the beginning doing the action, and then the other one is at the end where the action is being done to it. So let's make sure that we can see that and that we can fix it, okay? All right, so part one, identifying active voice and passive voice. You're gonna read each sentence and then describe if the underlying verb is written in active or passive voice. Write AV for active voice and PV for passive voice. And let's look at our example here. Our example reads, William drove to school. There's a quick and easy way that I can figure this out. Who or what is doing the action? If I ask myself that question, it's going to be William. And what is he doing? He is driving, okay? But an even easier way to see this for this activity is that the active voice is one word, okay? If it's a passive voice, we know it's going to be more than one word. okay? Was written. Was planned, okay? If we see a verb phrase which includes more than one word, then we can say, for this activity anyways, 100% of the time, it is going to be a passive voice, okay? Because it has the auxiliary verb and at the very least a past participle, okay? So that's how we know. So let's make sure we can see that throughout the activity here. So let's go look at number 1. The poem was written by William Shakespeare. This is going to be passive voice. Now, how do I know it's passive voice? Well, I know it's passive voice because it has an auxiliary verb, was, okay? So I'm just gonna write it down here, passive voice. And that's what I want you to do too, okay? But William Shakespeare is the one doing the action, not the poem. The poem can't do anything, okay? William Shakespeare is the one that's doing it, okay? Who is it? William Shakespeare. And what is he doing? He wrote, okay? What did he write? He wrote the poem, okay? Now let's look at number 2. Jasper chased her ball. In this sentence, this only has one word and it's underlined. So we know it's active, okay? But we can always ask ourselves those questions. Who or what did it? And what did they do it? And what did they do? In this case, who or what did it? Jasper did it. What did she do? She chased. What? And then she chased, what did she do it to? Her ball. Okay. So that's what I want you to do for part 1. It's pretty straightforward with the exception of number 5 and number 8. Now number 5 and number 8, we know that they are passive. How do we know that they're passive? Well, because it's more than one word in the verb phrase, okay? I want you to know that for this activity, that's how we know that they're passive, okay? But how do we know that they're passive? Well, we have auxiliary verbs, or helping verbs, at the beginning, the first and second word. But then we have the past participle. Now, the base verb, the base word for number 5 is eat. If we look at just the word, it's eat. Ate is the past tense, but the past participle is eaten. I'm the worst with mechanical pencils, guys. Eaten, okay? Eat, ate, and eaten. When we are creating the passive voice, we do not use the present tense, and we also do not use the past. We don't use present or past. We use the past participle, okay? So that's why you see it there in the sentence, okay? But we also have a difference here from the rest of the passive sentences, right? Because we're using the auxiliary verb was in them, okay? And because we're using the auxiliary verb was, this one uses is. And the difference here is that this is past, this is present. So this verb phrase is called the present continuous passive. Present continuous passive, okay? It's still a passive sentence. And for the sake of this activity, that's all that we want you to do is identify whether it's active or passive, okay? But I want you to go one step further if you're able to. And I want you to change this into an active sentence, like you do in number 2, in part 2, okay? So for these, I'm gonna do the first one for you. I'm gonna rewrite it and then I'm going to explain it, okay? So in this one, it is the girls are eating the dinner. Or you can write the girls are eating dinner. I just try to keep it as true to the original as possible, okay? But there you go. Now, how do I know that this is correct? How do I know this is what is being asked of me? Well, I have a present continuous, but my subject is plural. So I have to change this auxiliary verb here. So is is singular, which complements dinner, but now my subject is at the front of the sentence, right? If I rewrite it, the girls. The girls is plural, so I have to use are, and I want to keep it continuous, and I want to keep it active. So the subject goes first, and then the verb phrase, okay? And I do not want to use a past participle because I want to make it active. So I put the girls are eating the dinner. And that's how you do it, okay? So I want to see if you can do it with this new verb phrase that we just saw today, which is the present continuous passive, okay? I hope you can see that. There we go. All right, so let's go on to the next one and see if we can do it there too, okay? We can revise our sentences. Give me 1 second while I adjust this camera here. I want to make sure that it stays up. All right, should be good. Okay, so part 2, rewriting in active voice. Let's read the directions and go from there. Okay, so read each sentence, then rewrite each sentence in the active voice. For your reference, irregular verbs are highlighted green. Please look at the past tense. Look up the past tense. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Please look up the past tense of the past participle if you are not sure the correct word to use. Okay, that's what that little explanation under the directions is telling you to do. We have several words that are highlighted in green. Because they're highlighted in green, that means that they are irregular verbs. Okay, and because they're irregular verbs, they probably have a different word when you have to conjugate it in the past tense. And so your job is to make sure you can find that word by looking it up, okay? So let's look at the example to make sure we know what to do, and then you're good to go. So in our example here, it says, the bike was ridden by Bobby. So in this case, Bobby is my subject, okay? So what I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna put a little box around it. So I know that's my subject. I'm gonna put number 1. I'm gonna cross out the word by, and I'm going to cross out, this is my verb phrase, but I'm gonna cross out was. And this is number 2, but I gotta find the past tense of this, okay? And then here is number 3. This is how I rewrite it in the order, in the correct order, for it to be an active sentence, okay? So the answer is Bobby rode the bike. Let's go and do the first 2 so you know what to do, okay? So number 1, it was decided by Mr. Carlon. Mr. Carlon is my subject. So 1. I'm gonna cross out that. This is number 2. Cross that out. And then this is number 3. Okay? When I rewrite it, it's simply Mr. Carlon decided it. Okay? Now let's look at number 2. What's my subject? Roland. I'm sorry, let me read the sentence for you. The jacket was worn by Roland. So Roland is my subject. Take that out. It's my verb phrase. I'm gonna take out was, and then this is number 2. And then the jacket is at the end of the sentence. But remember, this is an irregular verb, so I have to look it up. And the past tense of worn is wore. Worn is the past participle. Okay, so let me rewrite the sentence for you here. Roland wore the jacket. I'm telling you guys, don't like mechanical pencils. They always break on me. I don't have the touch. Okay, Roland wore the jacket. That's how I switch it, okay? That's how I revise that passive sentence into an active sentence. I hope that clears it up for you guys. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. For this section, remember, you're simply just rewriting these in the correct order, all right? If you have any questions, let me know. Take care.